Story 1. The Shadow in Rio. The sultry air of Rio de Janeiro clung to my skin as I stepped off the plane, a 25-year-old solo traveler chasing the pulse of a city that never slept. My heart thrummed with anticipation, not just for the vibrant nightlife or the rhythmic beats of my favorite DJ, who was headlining a rooftop party that weekend, but for the adventure of exploring a place I'd dreamed of since childhood. I'd traveled alone before, from the cobblestone streets of Prague to the neon-lit alleys of Tokyo, and never once felt unsafe. But Rio, with its intoxicating blend of beauty and unpredictability, would test that confidence in ways I could never have imagined. I checked into a cozy Airbnb just outside the city's bustling core, a modern single-story house with sleek white walls and a minimalist charm that felt like a sanctuary. After unpacking, I grabbed a quick dinner at a nearby cafe, savoring the tangy zest of feijoada, then headed to the rooftop venue where the DJ set was already electrifying the crowd. The night unfolded like a dream, stars above, music below, and a trio of strangers who quickly became friends: Ethan, Jess, and James. Ethan and Jess were a couple, their easy affection warmed by the tropical night, while James, their third wheel, brought a sharp wit that kept us laughing. We danced until dawn, promising to meet up the next day for more of Rio's wonders. Saturday was a whirlwind of exploration. We shared a hearty brunch at a seaside bistro, the kind with checkered tablecloths and waiters who called you amigo. Then we ventured to the iconic Christ the Redeemer, its towering presence humbling us under the vast Brazilian sky, followed by a cable car ride up Sugarloaf Mountain, where the city sprawled below like a living mosaic. The beaches of Copacabana and Ipanema beckoned next, their golden sands alive with volleyball games and samba rhythms. But as evening approached, my new friends had tickets to another show, leaving me to my solo adventures once more. I didn't mind. Independence was my compass, and Rio was my map. Hunger eventually tugged me toward a small restaurant on the outskirts of the city, its faded sign promising affordable fare. The menu in the window boasted a few English translations, a relief since my Portuguese was rudimentary at best. Inside, the place was dimly lit, with long, narrow tables stretching into the shadows. It wasn't busy, just a few locals scattered at the far end, and a lone man, maybe in his 50s, seated at a table near mine. His weathered face and intense gaze marked him as out of place, though I couldn't say why. Perhaps he was a tourist like me, I thought, dismissing the unease that prickled my spine. The server approached, and after a brief exchange in halting Portuguese, I confirmed he spoke English. I ordered a plate of moqueca, a fragrant fish stew, and settled in, scrolling through my phone to pass the time. But the man's eyes were on me. I could feel them, heavy and unyielding. When the server left, he spoke, his voice carrying a thick Portuguese accent. "Your Portuguese is good," he said in English, a smile curling his lips. I thanked him politely, hoping to end the interaction, but he pressed on, switching to Portuguese as if to school me. His tone was meant to be charming, but it grated, each word laced with an unsettling familiarity. I buried my attention in my phone, but he wouldn't relent, alternating between English and Portuguese, commenting on my accent, my appearance, my presence in Rio. "You're sexy when you speak Portuguese," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. My stomach churned, but I forced a smile, not wanting to provoke him in this quiet, unfamiliar place. I told him I was staying with a friend, a lie to keep him at bay, and kept my answers vague. Relief washed over me when my food arrived, but it was short-lived. His meal came too, meaning he wasn't leaving anytime soon. I ate quickly, the stew's warmth doing little to quell the chill in my bones. When I asked for the check, he did the same, though his plate was barely touched. Alarm bells rang in my mind. I paid, muttered a curt goodbye, and stepped into the night, the streets now cloaked in darkness. The city's vibrancy had faded, replaced by an eerie stillness. I walked briskly toward my Airbnb, glancing over my shoulder every few steps. At an intersection, I spotted him across the street, his silhouette unmistakable. He was watching me, but when our eyes met, he turned away, feigning disinterest. My heart pounded. Was he following me, or was this just a coincidence? I pressed on, my pace quickening as the distance to the Airbnb shrank. Every rustle of leaves, every distant footstep sent my pulse racing. When I reached the house, I scanned the street one last time. There he was, standing on the corner, his gaze fixed in my direction. Panic seized me. He knew where I was staying. I fumbled with the keys, slipped inside and locked the door, my hands trembling as I closed every blind. I called my dad, my voice shaking as I recounted the night. "Stay alert," he urged. "Lock everything. Keep a knife nearby." His words, meant to comfort, only deepened my fear. Sleep was impossible. The next day, determined not to let fear cage me, I called an Uber to a downtown bar, losing myself in the thump of house music. But the unease lingered, a shadow I couldn't shake. When I returned to the Airbnb late that night, slightly drunk and exhausted, I collapsed onto the couch, only to freeze at a faint sound, the whisper of the outside world. The kitchen window was open, its blinds fluttering in the breeze. I hadn't left it that way, I was certain. The air conditioning had been running, every window sealed tight. Terror propelled me to my feet. I grabbed my phone, dialed the emergency number, and stumbled through an explanation in broken Portuguese. "There's a break-in," I gasped. I fled the house, hiding behind a bush across the street, my breath shallow as I waited. The police arrived swiftly, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. I emerged trembling and explained to an officer who spoke some English. They entered the house, shouting commands I couldn't understand. Minutes later, they emerged with a man in handcuffs, the man from the restaurant. Shock and relief crashed over me, mingling with horror. He'd been inside, likely hiding in the bedroom, waiting. If I hadn't noticed the window, if I hadn't called the police, I shuddered at the possibilities. The officers took him away, his face a mask of defiance. I left Rio the next day, the city's beauty forever tainted by that night. I haven't returned since, but the memory of his stare and the open window haunts me still. Story 2. The Nighttime Pursuit. The holiday season always brought a quiet melancholy to my college town, with most of my friends scattered to their hometowns, leaving me to navigate the empty streets alone. At 20, I was restless and strapped for cash, so I decided to pick up a part-time job to fill the void and pad my wallet. After a week of fruitless applications, a local restaurant called, a small, family-owned place known for its greasy comfort food and late-night crowds. They needed a waiter for a trial shift, and with my years of serving experience, I was confident I'd land the gig. The restaurant was a relic, its dim lighting casting long shadows across scuffed linoleum floors. The air carried a faint, unpleasant odor, like spoiled milk mixed with fryer grease, that seemed to linger no matter how much I scrubbed the tables. It wasn't the kind of place I'd choose to eat, but the owners were kind, and the promise of quick cash kept me focused. "It's just until classes start again," I told myself, ignoring the creeping unease that settled in my gut every time I clocked in. My trial shift went smoothly, and the owners offered me the job on the spot. I worked evenings, often staying until closing at 11 p.m., when the last patrons would stumble out into the cold. One night, around 10 p.m., I was alone out front, polishing silverware with a rag that smelled faintly of bleach. The restaurant was nearly empty, save for a table of 4 men in their 30s, their loud laughter and rough appearances setting them apart from the usual crowd. They looked like they'd rolled in from a construction site or a biker bar, their clothes rumpled and their faces weathered. I avoided eye contact, focusing on my task, but I could feel their stares, heavy and intrusive. Finally, they rose to leave, their chairs scraping against the floor. One of them, a burly man with a scruffy beard and a grin that didn't reach his eyes, approached the register. "That's $42.50, I said, keeping my tone professional. He handed over a wad of crumpled bills, his grin widening as he leaned closer. "You doing anything tonight, cutie?" he asked, his breath sour with beer. I forced a polite smile, deflecting with a curt, "Thank you. Have a good night." He chuckled, muttered something under his breath, and sauntered out with his friends, the door jingling behind them. Relieved, I cleared their table, wiped down the counters, and changed out of my uniform, eager to escape the restaurant's oppressive atmosphere. My apartment was just a few blocks away, An easy walk that saved me gas money. The night was crisp, the streets quiet save for the occasional hum of a passing car. I'd only been walking for 5 minutes when a sharp whistle pierced the silence, stopping me in my tracks. Across the street, under the flicker of a street lamp, stood the man from the register. He waved, his grin now a predatory leer, beckoning me to cross over. Fear rooted me to the spot. I turned and walked faster, my pulse hammering in my ears. The streets, so familiar by day, felt like a labyrinth now, each shadow hiding a threat. I could hear his footsteps, heavy and deliberate, closing the gap. My apartment was still 10 minutes away, too far to feel safe. Panic surged and I broke into a sprint, my sneakers pounding the pavement as I rounded a corner. His footsteps followed, louder now, relentless. Tears stung my eyes, blurring the world around me. A hand clamped onto my shoulder, yanking me backward with brutal force. I spun to face him, his red, contorted face inches from mine, his grin replaced by a snarl. "Don't scream, or I'll cut you," he hissed, his finger pressed to his lips. Time slowed, my mind racing with images of worst-case scenarios. But then, something snapped inside me. A primal, furious instinct. I lunged, digging my nails into his face, aiming for his eyes. He howled, clutching his face as I tore free and ran, my legs burning with adrenaline. I didn't stop until I reached my apartment, fumbling with the key until the door finally gave way. I collapsed inside, sobbing, my body shaking from exhaustion and fear. My roommates, alerted by the commotion, rushed to my side, their faces pale with concern. Through gasps, I told them everything. The man, the chase, the attack. They wrapped me in blankets, their voices a soothing anchor as I trembled. The next day, I called the restaurant and quit, unable to face the possibility of seeing him again. The owners were sympathetic, but I knew I couldn't go back. The memory of his grip and the rage in his eyes lingers, a reminder of how close I came to something far worse. Story 3. The Stalker's Obsession. At 19, I was juggling college and a part-time job, my bank account perpetually on the brink of collapse. To make ends meet, I took a second gig as a waitress at a 24-hour diner, a gritty outpost that catered to night owls and weary shift workers. The place was a time capsule, with cracked vinyl booths and a jukebox that played the same tired hits on repeat. Weeknights closed at 3 a.m., but weekends never stopped, drawing a chaotic mix of drunken college kids and bleary-eyed truckers. I worked the overnight shifts twice a week, the only server after 10 p.m., when the diner's fluorescent glow felt like the last bastion of life in a sleeping world. One Wednesday around 1 a.m., a man walked in alone, his hulking frame filling the doorway. He was older, maybe in his 40s, with a paunch and a face that hadn't seen a razor in days. I seated him at a booth, pasting on my best customer service smile despite the exhaustion tugging at my limbs. He introduced himself as Trevor, his voice low and overly familiar, and began flirting immediately, his compliments veering from awkward to invasive. "You're too pretty to be working this late," he said, his eyes lingering too long. I brushed it off, used to the occasional creepy patron, and took his order, a burger and a chocolate milkshake. As I moved about the diner, refilling coffee for the only other customer, I could feel Trevor's gaze tracking me, unblinking and intense. When he was the last one left, he called me over by name, his tone dripping with presumption. He paid his bill, leaving a $5 tip and a note scrawled on the receipt, his phone number, accompanied by a winking face. I crumpled it up, tossing it in the trash with a shudder. Good riddance, I thought, hoping that was the end of it. But Trevor returned a few nights later, slipping in just as the diner emptied out. "How's my favorite server doing?" he asked, his grin too wide, as if we shared some secret history. I forced a laugh, my energy sapped from back-to-back shifts, and humored him, hoping for a better tip. That was a mistake. He took my politeness as encouragement, inviting me to join him on his boat, a tiny, dilapidated vessel he showed me in a grainy phone photo. I deflected, mentioning my dad's boat to keep things neutral, but he pressed for my number. "I can't give that out. I'd get fired," Comasleden, a lie he surprisingly bought. When he left, another note awaited. "Don't be shy this time. Text me, it'll be our secret." Another winking face. Another measly $5 tip. The following week, he appeared again, this time at 2 a.m. The diner, a ghost town. His demeanor had shifted, his usual charm replaced by a cold edge. "You didn't call," he said, his voice flat, his eyes boring into mine. I reiterated my excuse about work rules, but he didn't respond, just turned and walked out. Relief flooded me, but it was fleeting. The next day, while at my other job, a co-worker from the diner texted me, "Do you know a fat bald guy? He asked for your full name." My blood ran cold. She'd given it to him, thinking he was just a fan of my service. I was furious, but more than that, I was scared. That evening, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Trevor, your favorite customer. I know you can't give out your number, so I got it myself. Now you didn't break any rules, haha." My hands shook as I blocked the number, but the violation gnawed at me. Days later, after a late shift, I found an envelope under my car's windshield wiper. Inside were photos, grainy shots of me in the diner, taken from the parking lot, followed by others, far more chilling. Me on my apartment's front deck, unlocking my door, even one through my living room window at night, my silhouette unaware of the eyes watching. I drove to the police station, the photos trembling in my hands. The officer's face hardened as I showed him the images and the text from Trevor. It was enough to act. I stayed at my parents' house that night, too terrified to return to my apartment. The next day, a detective called to say they'd warned Trevor. Any further contact would be harassment, with arrest to follow. I quit the diner immediately, unable to face its empty booths without seeing his face. When my lease ended, I moved to a new apartment, desperate to erase any trace of myself from his reach. Trevor was my first and only stalker, a specter whose shadow still creeps into my nightmares, reminding me how fragile safety can be.